warm welcome to everyone. Good morning all of you. I would like to thank Dr. Seema Singh for giving us this opportunity. And I will be talking to you on for next 10 minutes on pediatric orbital tumors. So this is the orbit, and as Dr. Ucha Singh mentioned that it is a jewel box. So definitely this orbit has a volume of only 30 ml and it can harbor a wide variety of orbital lesions, which could be neoplastic, non-neoplastic, inflammatory, and it is just within a volume of 30 ml. Everything which can occur from head to toe can also occur in the orbit. So the first question which comes into the mind of an oncologist or an ophthalmologist when a patient walks in with a orbital lesion is, what is it? And the answer is a stepwise approach which involves clinical history, thorough clinical examination, imaging, specific investigations and surgery. But the key to the diagnosis is histopathology and histopathology. So I will be just talking briefly on few orbital lesions in children. So this is the histopathological profile of 57 cases of pediatric orbital lesions in the age group of less than 14 years in the last 3 years. That is 11, 12 and 13 in LV Prasad ISD in Bhubaneswar. So the most common tumor was rhabdomyosarcoma and constituted 21% of all the pediatric orbital lesions, with cystic lesions another 21%. The cystic lesions which we came across was dermoid cyst as the most common, that is 4 of 12, and the rest were teratomatous cyst, microphthalmos with cyst, a single case of congenital cystic eye, epidermoid cyst, hydatid cyst and cysticercus cyst. Then the vasculogenic tumors forming another 17%. The most common was lymphangioma followed by capillary hemangioma. Inflammatory lesions, PNET, optic nerve and meningeal tumors contributed around 57 tumors. Then schwannomas, lymphomas, leukemias, myeloid sarcoma and leukocytic tumors like juvenile xanthogranuloma and Rosai-Dorfman disease. So just a few slides on congenital lesions in the orbit. It could be a congenital cystic eye, also known as anophthalmia with cyst, colpomatous cyst, known as microphthalmia with cyst, cephaloceles, dermoid cyst, epidermoid cyst, teratomatous cyst, also known as a teratoma, and ectopic lacrimal gland tissue. So congenital cystic eye, it represents primitive optic vesicles which fails to undergo differentiation into its adult component, and on microscopy it has two layers. The outer layer is a dense collagenous tissue which resembles sclera, and the inner tissue is the primitive retinal tissue, and sometimes it can even have some fragments or some remnants of conjunctiva, and then it can be well identified on PA stain, and it can have even some retinal pigment epithelium. And then we have the colpomatous cyst. The colpomatous cyst is nothing but incomplete closure of the fetal fissure, and the disorganized cystic neuroectodermal tissue prolapses into the orbit. So this cyst also looks just like an ophthalmia with cyst on microscopy. So this is the gross picture, and this is the microscopy when we are seeing it's a small malformed eye here, and this is the large cyst which is sitting posterior to the malformed eye, and this malformed eye has hyperplastic retinal pigment epithelium, and this is the cyst which is sitting posteriorly, and this cyst is actually lined on the inner side again by the retinal tissue and on the outside by dense collagenous tissue, but which is nothing but looks like sclera. Coming to the epithelial cysts, the most common epithelial cyst is the dermoid cyst, and this cyst is formed by just entrapment of the epithelial tissue during embryogenesis. And this is the CT picture, and what we see on microscopy is a keratinizing stratified squamous epithelial lined cyst, lumen filled with the keratinous material. This keratinous material is nothing but the cheesy material which is called by the surgeon and also by us. So, and what it contains is numerous hair follicles and adnexal structures and sebaceous glands. So this is the thing which helps us to identify a dermoid cyst. Then the teratomatous cyst, these children present it as early as 1 day of age, and they can go very fast sometimes, and within a few weeks, like 2 to 3 weeks, this patient presented in follow-up like this. And this is the microscopy. So on microscopy examination, what we see is that there will be elements of all the 3 germ cell layers, that is ectoderm, endoderm, mesoderm. The cyst will be have areas of keratinizing stratified squamous epithelium, again with this adnexal structures, hair follicles, sebaceous glands, and then you will have these lobules of highly mature cartilage. Then there will be some adipose tissue, some sweat glands. There can be respiratory epithelium. So this is a teratomatous cyst, or also known as a teratoma. Then just to tell the approach to the cystic lesions of the orbit, it could be an epithelial cyst or it could be a non-epithelial cyst. When it is an epithelial cyst, the most common is the dermoid cyst. A dermoid cyst, typical, as I've already shown you, is lined by keratinizing stratified squamous epithelium. Sometimes it can have an epithelium which looks conjunctivoid, but again it will have the adnexal structures. It could be an epidermoid cyst, Epidermoid cyst does not have the adnexal structures in the wall, and then it could be a cystic teratoma, also known as teratomatous cyst. Then the non-epithelial cyst could be the microphthalmos with cyst, a congenital cystic eye or an ophthalmic cyst, cephalocele, optic nerve sheath cyst, cysts seen in the neurogenic tumors, and then parasitic cysts. So coming to the most important and the most commonly encountered orbital tumor in childhood, that is the rhabdomyosarcoma, which is mesenchymal in origin, most commonly seen in the first decade of life. And the most common type of rhabdomyosarcoma which we come across in orbit is the embryonal type. And the other variants which can be seen is boteroid, alveolar and pleomorphic, which are rare in the orbit. So embryonal rhabdomyosarcoma can have a variable pattern, and depending upon the type of cells we see, we call it poorly differentiated or well differentiated. So when we see this tumor, this we also call it as an undifferentiated, this basically is called by a pathologist as a small round blue cell tumor. So what we see is these cells which are round, and sometimes they can even be oval to spindle, but still we call it as a small round. So we see small round cells, and they have very scant cytoplasm, a dense hypochromatic nucleus, and inconspicuous nucleolus, but they were very high mitosis, and these are then known as undifferentiated small round blue cell tumors. But rhabdomyosarcoma sometimes can have cells which are differentiated, and they show skeletal muscle differentiation. They have abundant eosinophilic cytoplasm which is very dense in color with an eccentric nucleus, and there will be admixed cells which are spindle in shape, or they can like elongated spindle, and some of them will be round. So when we see this is a differentiated rhabdomyosarcoma, differentiated variant. So when we get this kind of differentiated variant, we have a clue that it is a rhabdomyosarcoma, and we can just do a single marker and we can be sure that it is a rhabdomyosarcoma. But when it is undifferentiated, we have to go through a panel of immunohistochemical markers, and this that is when we don't have any clue. So we have to do CD45 to rule out a lymphoma. We have to think of Ewing sarcoma and ENET, and then we have to do CD99, and then to rule out a rhabdomyosarcoma, we can do Desmin and MyoD1. So when we do a MyoD1, we get a nuclear positivity. These are all the cells which are undifferentiated, which we saw in that picture, and they all have taken up MyoD1. And this is just to show the high rate of proliferation which we see in rhabdomyosarcoma. This is a Ki67 stain, and it shows that they have a high positivity, that is they have a high rate of turnover, and that is why they grow very rapidly and come back to the clinic within 2 weeks with a massive proptosis. So immunohistochemistry about when we talk about rhabdomyosarcoma, Desmin is a good stain but not very sensitive and specific. When it's an undifferentiated rhabdomyosarcoma, it is possible that the cells are very primitive and they will not take the stain, and it is still possible that Desmin can stain the other small round blue cell tumors to small extent, and it can. So in that case, what is a better stain is a MyoD1 or a myogenin. These are myoregulatory protein markers, and MyoD1 is an excellent marker for rhabdomyosarcoma. So another tumor, other small round blue cell tumors, sometimes we always ask our oncologists to send us the tissue as fresh. So when they send us tissue as fresh, what is very handy to us is a squash imprint. So when we do a squash imprint and make smears, we can see the tissue, and sometimes they give us very good clue on what kind of small round blue cell tumors they are, and also that tissue can be used for flow cytometry, and if it is a lymphoma, they are very useful adjunct. So this was squash imprint in our case of a small round blue cell tumor, and this was the PAS stain which we had done on that, and we saw this was cytoplasmic vacuoles which were PAS positive, and this is the H&E picture of the same. We are seeing a small round blue cell tumor, but because of the squash imprint and seeing the cytoplasmic vacuolations, we had two clues. That was it could be a lymphoma or a PNET, and then this was LCA, that is CD45, which was negative. So we were sure that it was not a lymphoma, and CD99 was positive. So we could know that it is Ewing sarcoma and PNET occurring in the orbit. This occurs in a little older age group as compared to rhabdomyosarcoma, and it can have more chances of involvement of the sinuses and bone involvement. So another common, not very common, yes, but we see myeloid sarcomas, which were previously known as chloromas, then they were called as the brown tumors, and then they were called as the myelogenous sarcomas, myeloblastic sarcomas, and then they were called as the granulocytic sarcomas. But currently, WHO currently favors the term myeloid sarcomas. Again, when this tumor comes, this is how the gross is. They have a greenish tinge, though this picture has been taken once it was fixed in formalin, so it did not have that green tinge after it was formalin fixed. And this is how was the microscopy. So these also look like as very undifferentiated tumors, and so they could be taken as any pleomorphic variant of a rhabdomyosarcoma. Ewing sarcoma, though they have a very blastic kind of chromatin and very irregular nuclear membrane. So when we see this contorted nuclear membrane and some cytoplasm, very pleomorphic cells, but we cannot on HNE, that is hematoxylin eosin stain, we cannot call it as a myeloid sarcoma. Again, we have to go through a panel of all immunohistochemical markers. We have to rule out a lymphoma, and that is a high-grade lymphoma. We have to rule out an undifferentiated rhabdomyosarcoma, Ewing sarcoma, PNET, and even a metastatic neuroblastoma. So we need a good clinical history. We need a radiological investigations, full systemic investigation of the patient. In addition, we need immunohistochemistry. So this is CD68, so that myeloid sarcoma CD68 was positive, and these myeloid sarcomas, they can have a pre-existing or it can have a concurrent or even later involvement with bone marrow and peripheral smear. So in that case, it was only after 6 weeks that this patient had involvement by peripheral smear by these atypical cells, which were very blastic, and the bone marrow was completely replaced by these atypical cells. So lymphoma is again another small round blue cell tumor, but a very starry sky pattern, which helps us in giving a clue of the nature of this lymphoma, that these are very high grade tumors. I mean, a lymphoma which is very high grade, and again the squash imprint showing the cytoplasmic vacuoles, so giving us a clue that it is a lymphoma, and this was LCA positive, CD45 positive. But this is not the end, so we have to again do a full panel of immunohistochemical markers to tell us the nature of exactly what type of lymphoma it is. And then these are the markers which we do when we get a case of lymphoma: CD20, CD3, CD10, BCL2, BCL6, 21 and 23. So Burkitt's will be positive for CD20, CD10 and BCL6. It will be negative for BCL2. Lymphangioma, a common vasculogenic tumor, and histopathologically they are characterized by large vascular dilated ectatic spaces, and they'll have this straw colored clear fluid. But the challenge is when they have large hemorrhages in them, there will be a lot of spaces which filled with blood. And then the clue which helps us, the clue is these lymphoid cells. When we see this lymphoid aggregates, then we know that it is a lymphangioma. So capillary hemangiomas, they mature with age. So when we see an hemangioma which is a very early age, they will be very cellular, and there has been times when they have been mistaken for hemangiopericytomas because they will be very poorly canalized. But when they grow with age, the canalization becomes better, and this is later when they have good lumens and nucleus, which are from plump, they have become little oval to spindle. Inflammatory lesions which we come across, I'll just jump on this inflammatory lesions and come to the optic nerve tumors. So the most common optic nerve tumor which we come in pediatric age group is the pilocytic astrocytomas, and they have this typical hair-shaped cytoplasmic processes which are elongated, and the nuclei which are spindle to round. And what helps us in IHC is GFAP, which helps in identification of these tumors. Histiocytic tumors, which could be histiocytosis X or eosinophilic granuloma or juvenile xanthogranuloma. Again, IHC helps us in differentiating some. Actually, eosinophilic granuloma will have eosinophils, and then you will have these foam cells, two-tone type of giant cells. These two-tone giant cells are very characteristic of these xanthogranulomatous lesions. They'll have these nuclei in the center surrounded by eosinophilic cytoplasm, and again a rim of foamy, pale, vacuolated cytoplasm. And there'll be some lymphocytes and plasma cells. So again, what happens here, what helps in IHC, they will be all CD68 positive, but eosinophilic granuloma will be positive for S100, and it will be CD1A positive, and will get characteristic Burkitt granules on electron microscopy. But juvenile xanthogranuloma will be negative for S100. So to summarize, orientation to ocular adnexal tumors is essential. It's a teamwork of clinicians, radiologists, pathologists and oncologists which unravels the mysteries of the eye and the orbit. And what is important is to upgrade and make a uniformity in the reporting system. So I would like to acknowledge my patients, Hyderabad Eye Research Foundation, Dr. Venuganti and my history technicians. Thank you.